As one of the youngest nations of Europe and the great powers, many were skeptical whether the Kingdom of Italy would survive the coming decades. She was threatened by political forces both within and without. Outside her borders, Austria-Hungary was eager to reclaim Lombardy, while the new French Republic wanted revenge for Italy's involvement in the Franco-Spanish War. Within her borders, conservative and reactionary elements worked in the south of the peninsula to restore the Bourbon monarchy to the two Sicilies, while in the north, Republicans, Jacobins, and even socialists would stage protests in major cities and metropolitan centers to form an Italian republic and overthrow the House of Savoy. Only a few of these rebellions posed any real threat, but the Venetian Revolt of 1870, when the Italian army was away besieging Marseille, gained serious traction and success as all of Lombardy fell to the rebels. The royal family feared that the capital of Milan might be threatened if the war did not end quickly. Thankfully, the quick surrender of Napoleon III allowed the Italian troops to quickly return to Lombardy and execute the rebel leaders. The end of the rebellion would bring an end to Italy's internal troubles for the following decade, as the Republican movement in the north was crushed and the reactionaries of the south were impressed by the monarchy's show of strength. However, her external enemies still needed to be dealt with, and the question of the Papal States presented such an opportunity. The Count of Cavour, who continued his position as Prime Minister, was tasked with the difficult question of handling the Papal States. The Pope did not want to become a vassal of Italy, but the Roman people clamored to join the newly united kingdom. For his part, Victor Emmanuel II did not want war with the Pope, especially since such a war would rope in both France and Austria-Hungary. While on vacation in Spa, he sent a telegram to Cavour to review before sending along to His Holiness Pius XI. The telegram offered to negotiate the purchase of the land surrounding Rome and the creation of a smaller papal state to enjoy its own autonomy and independence. But the crafty Cavour saw an opportunity to instigate war with France and Austria-Hungary if the telegram was doctored. There were still some Italian minorities living in Tyrol and Istria, which Italy could reclaim as her own, and if France was the instigator of the war, it could be sufficient in coercing Germany to join the war and give Italy an easy victory. Through some clever rewording, he phrased the telegram to make it sound as if the Pope would have his independence and control of Rome, but only after the surrounding land had been handed over to Italy without reimbursement. The cleverly rephrased Spa telegram was the only excuse France needed to declare war, with Austria-Hungary eagerly honoring her alliance to France to reclaim her lost Italian influence. Unfortunately for Cavour, the telegram did not have the desired effect of bringing Germany into the war. The cautious Otto von Bismarck was loath to wage war on Austria-Hungary at a time when he was attempting to repair relations between her and Germany, and potentially bring her into the Central Powers. As a result, Italy stood alone against two great powers. At first, the Italians were succeeding against the French, but retreating from the Austrians. The Italian military's experience in the Franco-Spanish War provided them with all the critical information about important roads and railways to make swift incursions into the Rhone Valley, whereas the Austrians launched an unexpectedly quick offensive into Lombardy, where defenses were weaker and forces were smaller following the revolts of 1870. By the turn of the year, the situation had completely reversed, where the French quickly responded to the Italian invasion by quickly mobilizing and driving the Italians back to Milan. As the royal family fled the royal palace, the Italian military retaliated by moving their forces into Rome itself and proclaim it as the new capital of Italy, holding Pius XI as hostage within his own papal palace. In Lombardy, it seemed that the Austro-Hungarian juggernaut had run out of steam. Despite the success of the earlier offensive, they had been unable to follow it up when Romania had declared war to reclaim Transylvania, starting the Third Balkan War. This forced Austria-Hungary to divide her forces and provide the Italians with the opportunity to push back into Veneto and even make their way to Istria and Tyrol. After another year of heavy fighting, the war had reached a standstill. The French occupied Milan, but Victor Emmanuel and his family were safe in their new capital of Rome. The Italians had made their way to the gates of Vienna itself, but had to divide their forces to fight back against the French. At last, Cavour caved in and began peace talks. Italy was unable to claim Tyrol and Istria. Austria-Hungary was forced to cut its military down to size and remove some of her fortifications on the Italian border, and France was forced to acknowledge Italy's control over the former papal states. The defeat in the war would spell the end for Boulanger's political career, as this failed endeavor dashed his hopes of winning the presidency. For all three countries, it was a war without a victor. However, it did establish Italy's military capability. Italy had been able to hold off an offensive by two of its most powerful neighbors without Germany's help. While Spain may be weak and the Netherlands small, Italy has proved herself to be a worthy ally of Germany, an ally which can hold her own against the great powers of Europe. Britain rose to prominence as the world's only superpower by riding the rising tides of the world. When the peoples of Europe clamored for democracy and representative government, Britain maintained a steady balance between monarchical conservatism and republican liberalism through her parliamentary system of government. When industrialization and commercial capitalism replaced landed wealth and the feudal system, Britain embraced the nouveau riche and the new global market. Such changes allowed Britain to rise as one of the great powers and one of the major factors that allowed her to resist the strength and influence of Napoleonic Europe. Yet that was Britain at the start of the 19th century. Now, towards the end of the 19th century, the rising tides have receded. Pseudo-absolutist monarchies, in the style of the new German Empire, where powerful chancellors and kings circumvent the will of the people, have now become the new model government in Europe. While republics like Spain and France have become mired in parliamentary debate and deliberation, Prussian-style monarchies like Russia and Italy thrive, gaining victory after victory. Diplomatic and principled leaders like Castlereagh and Metternich have been replaced by unorthodox and unscrupulous schemers like Bismarck and the Count of Cavour. The waves of nationalism that have strengthened Russia and Germany now threaten Britain, as sepoy mutineers and Sinn Féin rebels threaten the integrity of the empire. The British people prefer legislation on social welfare programs and government aid rather than more imperialist wars for queen and country. Britain is making gains abroad, greater economic and political control in Egypt and Asia, but she is spreading her resources and manpower thin. While Britain is slowly weakening under the strain of empire, her continental neighbors grow in strength and ferocity, particularly the new German Empire. Not only does a unified Germany match Britain in military strength, but it also wields considerable influence over Europe, maintaining alliances with the Republic of Spain, the Kingdom of Italy, and even managed to steal the Kingdom of the Netherlands away from the British alliance, leaving Britain with no allies on the continent. Similarly, the Empire of Russia continues its conquests into southern Europe, driving the Ottomans back into Asia Minor and establishing small client states in the Balkans. Britain found herself at a crossroads: who to support as the great power of Europe, Germany or Russia? Britain could not delay her answer long, as the Third Balkan War would force her hand. Now, with Romania having joined the Balkan Alliance, the Ottoman Empire looked like a weaker target than ever. There was still the issue of the Turkish alliance with France and Austria-Hungary, but the Balkan Alliance was content to wait for the right moment to strike. When Italian forces were laying siege to Vienna, Romania decided the moment had come, declaring war directly on Austria-Hungary to claim Transylvania with its Romanian minority. After Romanian forces had great success moving into Carpathia uncontested, Serbia would follow 2 weeks later to claim the Vojvodina region with its Serb minority. Bulgaria was tempted to follow, but hesitated once the Austro-Italian War ended, and Ottoman and Austrian armies turned and responded with great ferocity. Russia did not involve herself in what she considered an aggressive war by her client states, rather than a defensive one. Furthermore, Tsar Alexander II was concerned about how the other European powers might react if Russia again supported the Balkan Alliance's ambitions, especially since they were now attacking Austria-Hungary. However, once word reached Moscow that the Ottomans had made their way to Belgrade and were destroying the city, Alexander II relented and declared war on Austria-Hungary. The outcry of Europe was just as Alexander feared. Many statesmen in Austria, Germany, Italy, and France decried the unchecked aggression of the rabid Russian bear. All Alexander could hope for was a quick end to the war, but a quick end would come. After a decisive victory at Aderna, Russia had forced the Ottoman Sultan to the bargaining table and began carving up the Ottoman and the Austro-Hungarian empires. With Turkey out of the war, Kaiser Franz Joseph feared that Alexander II would then turn his attention to Austria-Hungary and begin carving up his empire the same way. But what was a disaster for Austria-Hungary was an opportunity for Germany, an opportunity Otto von Bismarck was sure to exploit. On June 29, 1875, Russian, Ottoman, and Austrian diplomats met at San Stefano in Italy to draw up Russian demands. For the Ottomans, the demands dictated the independence of Albania, greater territorial expansion of Greece and Bulgaria along the Aegean Sea, territorial expansion for Serbia into Bosnia, and the surrender of the Bosphorus Straits to Russia. For the Austrians, the demands dictated the surrender of the Banat and Transylvania regions to Romania, and the surrender of the Vojvodina region to Serbia. The Austrians were loath to accept, but it seemed that the Ottomans had no choice but to accept Russian demands, and if the Ottomans dropped out of the war, it seemed unlikely that Austria-Hungary could continue the fight. The head Austrian diplomat, Viscount Taffa, sent a frantic telegram message to Bismarck to enlist the support of the Central Powers to force Russia to back down. Unable to let an opportunity slip, Bismarck immediately pressured German Kaiser Wilhelm I into threatening Russia with war on July 1, 1875. Europe was in tense apprehension. Although parts of Europe had been disturbed by recent conflicts, a war between Russia, Germany, and their allies would embroil most, if not all, of the continent. The British Parliament was in turmoil, as it seemed like the uneasy peace following the Napoleonic Wars was about to be undone. The time for decision had come. As British power in Europe was declining, she had to choose between Germany or Russia. Although Russia's warmongering had done little to win the British public over, Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli rallied the Conservative Party in favor of Britain's old enemy, arguing that Germany's Central Powers, uniting Europe under a single body, were a far greater threat to British power than Russia could ever pose. On July 4th, Victoria declared her support for Russia and demanded that Germany retract her threats. Alexander II, now confident of Britain's support, asserted that he would not revise the Treaty of San Stefano. The Kingdom of Italy, riding high on her success in the Austro-Italian War, believed a war with Russia could extend her influence across the Balkans and the Middle East, and so supported Germany. Most European nations, however, were fearful of leaving their fates in the hands of the great powers, while Denmark and Sweden were fearful that a German invasion could overrun their kingdom. The Netherlands and Spain feared the British Royal Navy. France, still recovering from the Austro-Italian War, debated heavily whether to exact revenge on the German invaders or to challenge the hegemony of her longtime rival, the United Kingdom. It seemed prudent to President de MacMahon to wait and see if the great powers could reach a peaceful resolution before committing to a side. The hours and the days passed, but it seemed clear that Russia would not give in. On July 7th, 1875, Germany, having received no response from Russia, declared war. On July 8th, Italy and Spain would also declare war on Russia, while Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, and the newly independent Albania would declare war on Germany. On July 10th, Britain declared war on Germany. On July 12th, the Netherlands declared war on Britain, Denmark and Sweden declared war on Germany, and Portugal declared war on Spain. The concert of Europe had failed, and the July crisis had become the Summer War. The first month of the Summer War was a tremendous success for the Central Powers. Although the Russo-British alliance was stronger than the Central Powers, the early gains made by Germany showed the weakness of maintaining an overseas empire with limited resources. The Dutch Navy kept the British Royal Navy at bay in the North Sea, while the Italian Navy harassed the Balkan alliance in the Adriatic and the Aegean Seas. The Dutch and German soldiers mobilized swiftly, forcing Denmark to capitulate after only a month, while German Kaisermarines made landings near Stockholm, putting pressure on Sweden. With her Scandinavian allies gone after an unexpectedly swift German offensive, Britain struggled on how to respond. One proposal was for a naval invasion of the Netherlands. Although the Royal Navy could overcome the combined Dutch and German navies, the cost for such a deadly amphibious assault caused the motion to be dismissed. Another proposal was to move Indian and Australian garrison regiments through the Suez Canal to land near the Balkans or Ukraine to aid the Russian front, but this idea was dismissed as it would take too long to move so many men across such a long distance. In the end, the only plan devised was to dock in friendly Norway and attempt to liberate the occupied Sweden and Denmark. On the Eastern Front, the paltry Russian forces were swiftly defeated in what von Moltke has termed blitzkrieg, a policy of lightning-fast war in taking out critical communication and transportation junctions to facilitate swift invasion. With most of the Russian army in the Balkans, von Moltke was able to move the Eastern Army with incredible speed, threatening to take Moscow before winter set in. Alexander quickly scrambled to call his Siberian forces to rush to the front lines with all possible speed, a difficult challenge since there were few railroads connecting Moscow with the eastern reaches of Russia. The road to Moscow lay open. Most Russian forces were too far away, either to the south or to the east, and the British were still mobilizing and planning their liberation of Denmark. After the defeat of the Romanian forces at Radom and the Russian defeat in the Siege of Warsaw, Alexander II caved and agreed to come to Berlin to discuss peace. Yet Bismarck too was eager for peace, as the war had left Germany's western flank exposed if France did decide to attack. On September 30th, 1875, Russia was forced to renege on her demands to dismantle Austria-Hungary, as well as pay for some reparations to both the Ottomans and the Austro-Hungarians. Romania was able to negotiate a separate peace with Austria-Hungary to take only South Transylvania, while leaving Banat and North Transylvania under Hungarian control. The Ottoman Empire, on the other hand, was ultimately forced to respect most of the Treaty of San Stefano, especially since Bulgarian and Greek troops had already moved in to occupy the territories. Even Germany was forced to admit that the sick man of Europe was in need of an amputation, much to the celebration of the Balkan alliance. Russia was forced to cut down the size of her military to some embarrassment. However, seeing as how Britain had cast her lot with Russia, Queen Victoria offered to strengthen the Russo-British alliance when she became aware that Alexander's younger son, Sergei, had fallen in love with her daughter Beatrice. Since Beatrice's fiancé, the son of the ill-fated Napoleon III, had died in the Austro-Italian War, a betrothal was made, and the two royals married. Now, with their politics and families united, Russia and Britain have combined their land and naval dominance in both East and West to counter Bismarck's new Central Powers. Although his victory was incomplete, Bismarck, on the other hand, had achieved his true objective, creating a new, firm, continental alliance system that can withstand pressure from the other great powers. Germany had undergone her greatest test, to unite her people and the other continental powers to defeat the United Kingdom, the uncontested world power until now. The concert of Europe has failed, and a new European order must be built from its ashes. After defeat and humiliation in both the Austro-Italian War and the Third Balkan War, Austria-Hungary is soon to lose her status as a great power to the rising Kingdom of the Netherlands. The alliance with France, once seen as a valuable asset in combating both German and Russian influence, has now become more of a liability following France's recent defeats. Furthermore, their refusal to help in the Third Balkan War against Romania and Russia has Franz Joseph convinced that the French are fair-weather friends at best. Now, with Bismarck attempting to extend the olive branch, there are now open speeches in the Hungarian parliament in Budapest, advocating a dissolution of the French alliance and joining Germany's new Central Powers. Bismarck's invitation is tempting, especially at a time when Russia and her Balkan allies look with envy on the empire's eastern territories. If any reports of maltreatment of ethnic minorities reaches the ears of the Kremlin, rest assured the Russians will gain the support of Britain and France, and the Russian eagle will descend hard on its prey, while Serbia and Romania will circle like vultures to pick up after the carcass. Rewarding loyal subjects like the Croats and the Poles might extinguish the nationalist movements that were catching like wildfire. One obstacle to such reforms is Hungary. Although the Hungarians fought long and hard to gain recognition as a minority within the empire, Now they fear that the inclusion of more minorities into the government will drown them out. Franz Joseph could use the authority of the crown to force through the establishment of a triple monarchy, but probably not without first plunging the empire into a civil war. Now that the Ottoman Empire has been permanently expelled from the Balkans, it is now Austria-Hungary that has become the sick man of Europe. Racked with military defeats, internal national uprisings, and a divided government which is unable to answer these challenges. Once the White Queen on Europe's chessboard, Austria now finds herself a mere pawn in the hands of the other great powers.